Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel and another episode of Webcomic Wednesday. So today we are going to be discussing a new webcomic. It's actually quite brand new, but I've just discovered it and it's very wholesome and I love it, so I want to give it some love. It's called Temperature of Love by N Warrior, I believe, is the author. It doesn't have a current update schedule, but I think it seems to be like there's new pages coming out twice a week. I've been reading it on Tapas, but I think it's also available on Webtoons. As always, all of that lovely information will be linked down below. There's about 16 I guess episodes on Tapas, and they're kind of like 2 to 3 pages. They're fairly short, but they're very sweet and they're very wholesome. So I just thought I would share so other people can come on the journey of enjoying this new comic with me. So to dive into the plot, it follows Damien, who has ice powers and is very skilled, and then there is Brian, who has fire powers and is not very good at controlling them, and they are dating. And then there is Tamara, who is their friend, who has teleportation powers. So essentially in this world, when you turn 23, if you have powers, they'll like become available. So you get put into this like testing center on your, I don't know if it's on your 23rd birthday or right after, because I'm like, that sucks if you have to spend your whole birthday in a testing center. And then if the powers show themselves, you get put on these like power blockers and you have to stay in the facility for a year until you learn how to use your abilities. So Damien has been there for quite some time, and it's his responsibility to help kind of coach people in how to use their powers. And they also paired him with Brian because since he has ice powers, he can like cool him down whenever he's getting a little too hot, which is very sweet. And yeah, so the story kind of starts with these like little one-off episodes. And then as it's gone on, there's kind of these chapters that have fuzzy backgrounds, and those are chapters that are kind of flashbacks. So we're getting a little bit more about Brian's history, what he was doing beforehand, and kind of his relationship with his parents and what happens there, as well as a little bit more of like, I guess, the lore around the way that the world works, because if you have powers, it can be a lot more difficult for you to find a job because people are worried about the outcome of your powers and that like impacting or causing damage to what they're trying to put together. So to dive into the characters a little bit more, so Brian is just this very sweet, lovable guy, but he's also like so overwhelmed by everything that's happening in some ways, and so sad that it just like breaks my heart. Like he'll like try and eat a popsicle, and because of his fire powers it'll all melt, and he'll just be like crying like, why can't I have nice things or spicy food? And it's really sweet but also like a little bit heartbreaking that he's like trying to relearn everything in his life, and we're getting into more of those conversations where he's like, this sucks that I have to start everything over from scratch, and I just felt like I was getting my life sorted out, and now I've had this curveball thrown my way. Which is where his boyfriend Damien really balances him out. One of the first times that he has kind of like this fire attack, Damien just like gives him a hug because like that's the fastest way he can think to like cool him down using his ice powers. And then after that it kind of becomes like more of like a thing of intimacy between them, and there's this really sweet moment where Damien's like, you know, I can give you a hug when you're like not out of control of your powers. And then of course when they end up dating, there's like other ways that he's kind of like able to cool him down, which is really sweet, the way that they just kind of reach this equilibrium together. And Tamara is very, very spunky. She's got these teleportation powers that she can't quite control, and she has these like really quirky stories of like random places that she's just like spontaneously shown up in and doesn't really know what to do. And she kind of acts as like this grounding point for the two of them in order to kind of balance out this story of friends trying to figure out this new their new powers and this new world that they're living in. What I love about this comic is how wholesome it is. It's just so sweet, and the way that they think about a lot of those dynamics of like hot and cold, and like, oh, what's something like really mundane that if you had heat powers that you couldn't control would be like really difficult to do. And that's where some of those things like popsicles and spicy food and like trying to take a bath and not boil yourself alive comes into play. And that's where I think a lot of the wholesome dynamics of the relationship between Brian and Damien come into play, because as I said before, they very much reach that equilibrium with each other. They can kind of share a bath and have the water be a perfect temperature, or when they like hug each other. If Damien's powers are a little bit too much, they kind of balance it out and it cools them down. And it's just kind of that, it's that idea of when you're in a relationship being able to help the other person and kind of create this sort of balance where you're both giving things to the relationship that helps you both keep a level head in situations, which is something that I think the comic does a really amazing job at. On top of that, just kind of some of the ways that they look out for each other and their well-being and kind of try and help them grapple with the uncertainties of this new world is something that's really sweet about the comic. And then the line drawings and the use of color in this is very well done because it's very much in black and white, and then there's like blocks of color that represent their powers. So that's like red for the fire powers and blue for the ice powers, that kind of give a sense of this like overwhelming feeling when the powers are being used, which very much reflects the experience of the characters throughout the comics. Yeah, I think this is going to be a very short Webcomic Wednesday just because it's a very new webcomic and I could talk about it for a lot longer, but I feel like it would just be me explaining the plot of every episode that's been released so far, and that's kind of spoilery, so I think we're gonna reel it in there. But yeah, as I said, there's only like 16 things out right now, but it comes out about twice a week, and every time I see the notification I like want to read it immediately because it just leaves me with like a very warm feeling, which is something that's really sweet, and it always just makes my day. Sometimes I'll be in class or I'm on the phone and I'm like, okay, I have to remember that the second I'm out of this, I can go and read this because I just want to pick it up and dive in right away. And I think that's one of my favorite things about the serialized form of webcomics is while sometimes it really frustrates me because I want the story all at once, in other times it's wonderful because you get those little updates or those little stories within a story, which I think is another thing that this comic does really well, is that each one's almost its own mini story in a way, so you're getting a little bit more of that feeling of resolution and not being left on like a cliffhanger for 2 weeks as you are with some comics. And that just makes me feel so warm and fuzzy and make my day every time that it happens, and it's so nice to have those like little things to look forward to. That's one of the things that I've loved the most since getting back into like art and reading, is just being able to exist in worlds where I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this comic or I love this person's artwork, and being able to support them, whether that's through comments, likes, ink, if you're using tapas or buying prints or things like that, is just, it's lovely. I love it. I love the art community. I love webcomics, and yeah, I'm loving this series, so we'll see where it goes next week. Thanks for watching. As always, if you guys have read this comic, have other comic recommendations that you would like to leave for me, feel free to drop a comment down below. Otherwise, be sure to like and subscribe and turn on that bell so you get notifications when I post new videos. I think that's everything for now, and I will see you all in the next video.